Chapter 6, Unanticipated Moment. I revved up the electric motorcycle and waited for Preeti to hop onto the back seat. It had been half an hour since she slapped me, but the anger in her face remained palpable. "Come on, let's go." I turned back to face her standing a few feet away. She remained silent, her arms folded across her chest. "I've said sorry 10 times already. Let's get going, your parents will be worried sick," I pleaded with her once more. She exhaled sharply, composed herself, and mounted the bike. "Grab onto my shoulder tightly, you don't want to fall," I instructed her gently before accelerating. Still, she didn't reply. As we turned onto the highway and picked up speed, I adjusted the mirror to catch a clear glimpse of her beautiful yet angry face. But, I had to fix this before we reached her house. "Preeti, please forgive me. I promise I won't lash out like that again," I implored. Still, she remained silent. This day is a disaster, I thought to myself, revving up the accelerator further to get her home as soon as possible. "Aditya, pull over here," Preeti's voice cut through the silence after a few minutes of riding. "What's wrong?" "This isn't your house," I inquired, glancing at her through the rear-view mirror. "Just stop," she commanded with more urgency in her tone this time. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the bike to a halt. "Wait here," she said before disappearing into the nearby medical shop. As I waited for her return, I couldn't help but check my left eyebrow for any signs of blood. Sure enough, there was a small wound that had been bleeding. "Aditya, turn this way," Preeti's voice echoed, pulling me out of my thoughts. I turned to face her, and she began to tend to my wound with a piece of cotton. Watching her care for me filled me with joy, and I couldn't help but grin widely as she pulled out a band-aid and sealed the wound. "Let's go," she said, taking her place on the back of the bike. I continued to smile, feeling grateful for her care, and revved up the accelerator. "You bled a lot because of your recklessness," she scolded lightly, giving me a gentle smack on the back of my head. "You're incredible," I replied, still grinning from ear to ear. Stop here," Preeti interrupted my thoughts as we neared her street. "What's wrong?" "Your house is just a few feet away, let me drop you there," I offered, trying to persuade her. "And what do I say to my strict father if he asks who you are?" she asked pointedly, leaving me without an answer. I watched as she left step by step, feeling a sense of longing to be with more for a few more moments. As she took a few steps, she turned around and flashed me a heart-melting smile, silently saying goodbye. I couldn't bring myself to leave until she was safely inside her house. I watched her walk down a row of 4 houses, one after the other. Suddenly, my attention was diverted to a little boy riding his bicycle in front of his house. Preeti's eyes lit up at the sight of the child, and she couldn't resist going over to him. She scooped him up in her arms and gave him a kiss on his rosy cheek. My heart sank as I watched them, thinking to myself, that should be me. "Had your ayam kuchulu?" Preeti asked the little boy, still holding him in her arms. "Kuchulu?" I pondered, trying to recall when I last heard this word. It suddenly struck me that it was a term of endearment used in a message I had received in the lab. I quickly whipped out my phone and opened the Marksage app. There it was, the last of 6 messages: "You have a smile that could light up a room and a voice that could calm the wildest of storms. Kuchulu, but your anger is boorish." My heart skipped a beat as I realized that it was Preeti who had sent me the message, and that she undoubtedly liked me. I was over the moon, and as I watched Preeti leave the little boy on his bike and head towards her house, I knew it was time to make her mine. With a grin plastered on my face, I revved my bike and rode off into the night, excited for what the future held. As I sat on my bed, I mustered up the courage to confess my feelings to Preeti. I typed a message to her, I need to tell you something important. What is it? She replied promptly. I paused for a moment, wondering how to begin. Seeking inspiration, I turned to OpenAI for some love quotes. It suggested, you know what's more exhilarating than the rush of riding a roller coaster? It's the feeling of taking a leap of faith with someone you like, and I can't wait to see where our next adventure takes us. That's a bit too creative, my inner voice chimed in. But what the heck, let's give it a shot, I thought as I sent the quote to her. Preeti's response caught me off guard. Haha, what's this? What's the matter of being so creative? She innocently asked. I felt a little frustrated as I struggled to find the right words. Should I seek advice from my dad? He is out of station now, also that would be silly, I thought. I'll handle this on my own, I decided. Just then, Mitra called me in a panic. I'm in trouble, Maka. I need your help, he said urgently. What's going on, Mitra? I asked, sensing his distress. I proposed to Ayesha while texting her, and she didn't take it well. She said she'll deal with me in college, he explained, his voice quivering with anxiety. Don't worry, Maka, I've got your back. Let's face it together tomorrow, I replied reassuringly before hanging up. Realizing that it wasn't the right time to confess my feelings, I messaged Preeti, I'll tell you directly tomorrow in college. Lols, okay. She replied. The next day, MBA block, Andhra University. Mitra and I arrived at college early to discuss the logistics of settling down. Although I wasn't entirely sure how I could assist him, I was eager to lend a hand. Mitra, on the other hand, appeared rather anxious, his face creased with worry lines. As we sat waiting in the classroom, I kept a keen eye out for the girls' arrival. If only they'd turn up sooner, I mused to myself, hoping that we'd have ample time to finalize our plans. Before long, the door swung open and three girls glided into the room, Amita, Aisha, and Preeti. My heart skipped a beat, and I watched intently as they made their way over to their seats. Aisha, however, shot a haughty glance in Mitra's direction, causing him to visibly tense up even more. Despite the tension in the air, I couldn't help but marvel at the beauty and grace of Preeti. The girl's presence filled the room, suffusing it with a vibrant energy that was both alluring and intimidating. As the girls shuffled into their seats, I eagerly awaited their usual huddle where we'd catch up on the latest gossip. But on that day, there was no sign of their usual camaraderie. I glanced over at Preeti and quirked my eyebrows in a silent question, hoping for an explanation. But all she could do was shrug her shoulders, conveying her own bewilderment. After a couple of awkward minutes, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I rose from my seat and beckoned the girls over with an enthusiastic wave. Hey guys. Come join me for a quick chat, I said, hoping to break the ice. All good? I asked Aisha, feigning ignorance to the situation. I guess you already know what happened, she replied, her voice laced with a hint of frustration. So why bother asking me again? I don't understand why you're cutting us off, I said to Aisha, trying to reason with her. And now you want to command me too? Aisha replied, her voice laced with anger. We've only been friends for a few months, and this idiot decides to confess his feelings for me. What did you expect me to do? I didn't know how to respond, so I simply nodded. After a moment of silence, I attempted to defuse the situation. Let's talk this out, Aisha. It's important to look at this from all angles before we make any decisions. I noticed that Preeti and Amita had gone quiet, and I wasn't sure why. Perhaps they didn't want to get involved in the drama. What is there to talk about, Aditya? Aisha spat. Have you ever thought of me in that way? Why would I asked, trying to keep the peace. This is about his feelings, not mine. Let's not. Aisha interrupted me, I don't want to hear it, Aditya. Let me give you an example. You and Preeti have a close friendship, right? What if you confess love to her? She turned to Preeti, what would be your reaction, Preeti? There was an awkward silence in the room, and I glanced over at Preeti before looking away. What are you trying to say, Aisha? Preeti asked cautiously. She continued, feelings are personal. Just because you don't cope with Mitra, doesn't mean all others are wrong. I could tell that Preeti was uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was going. So, that means you would say yes if Aditya confessed love. Aisha cut in, her tone accusatory. The room fell silent once again, and I could see the embarrassment on Preeti's face. I didn't know how to help her, so I stayed quiet. Unable to bear the tension any longer, Preeti abruptly stood up and left the classroom without another word. Preeti, wait. I called after her, but she didn't turn back. Why did you have to embarrass her like that? I was me who has done this. Mitra spoke up, clearly upset. Shut up, Mitra. Aisha snapped, her anger still simmering. I felt frustrated and angry at how this situation was unfolding. Enough, Aisha. Let me ask you something. Can you guarantee that you've never had a crush or won't ever fall in love with someone? Because if you have, you would understand how difficult it is to keep those feelings to yourself. Aisha started to calm down as I spoke, and I continued. What did Mitra do wrong? He confessed his feelings for you, perhaps a bit prematurely, but that doesn't make him a bad person. You could have politely declined and given him time to process his feelings. Is that too much to ask? Aisha slumped back in her chair, her defiance fading under the weight of my stern tone. I took a seat beside her, my voice softening as I tried to reason with her. I'm not sure what you know about Mitra, but I've known him for years. He can be mischievous with his friends, but he's never crossed any lines. Just ask anyone in the class if they have any complaints about him. As you claim that we're all your friends, is this all you knew about him? Tears welled up in Aisha's eyes, and I felt a twinge of discomfort. I'm done explaining, I said firmly. Take some time to think about it. With that, I stood up and left the room, hoping to find Preeti and make things right. After searching high and low across the MBA block, I finally found Preeti standing sadly at the top of the building, leaning against the parapet. As I walked towards her, I couldn't help but notice the vastness of the campus and the world beyond, and how much she meant to me. She was looking down, clearly upset. As I approached her, she turned away from me to hide her tears and emotions. I leaned against the parapet beside her, making it easier to talk. It really hurts, doesn't it? When people judge us before they even know the truth, I started the conversation. She didn't respond. Why didn't you just tell her no when she asked you? I probed gently. What do you mean? Preeti asked, still avoiding eye contact. We've gone out to movies, restaurants, and other places together. If I had asked you out, would you have said yes? I clarified my question. You're asking me just to embarrass me again, aren't you? Preeti turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. No, I genuinely want to know, I said, wiping away her tears with my thumb. What's your answer? Aisha was wrong. Just because we're friends, it doesn't mean we should be in a relationship unless. Unless we both really like each other, Preeti said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been spending time with you only because I do like you, Preeti, I said, smiling at her. Preeti looked at me in surprise. Is this a proposal? It can be whatever you want it to be, I replied, smiling back at her. You expect me to say yes just because we're friends? Preeti asked skeptically. No, I'm asking because I know you like me too, I said confidently. I don't know what you're talking about, Preeti protested, trying to keep a straight face. You can't fool me, Preeti. You've been sending me secret messages on Mark Message and acting all innocent, I teased her. Preeti blushed and looked away. I'm not sure I can wait for you to admit your feelings first, so I'll say it, I said, dropping down to one knee and taking her hand. My heart beats to the rhythm of your name, and every breath I take is a tribute to your love. I love you, Kuchwalu. Tears welled up in Preeti's eyes as she squeezed my hand up, making me stand. She hugged me hard before she said, I love you too, Kuchwalu. I stood up and wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. It felt like we were the only two people in the world in that moment. Suddenly, Mitra appeared out of nowhere, interrupting our blissful moment. What's going on here? We're in love, I declared happily. That's great news. I have good news too, Aisha accepted my love. Mitra exclaimed, beaming from ear to ear. I hugged him tightly, congratulating him. That's amazing, Maka. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of our challenging story in total. Hey. If you liked this episode, please make sure to share it with your friends, family, and loved ones. I would really appreciate it if you could leave your thoughts and predictions for the next episode in the comments section. Also, I'm a great creative writer and I'm open to collaboration. If you're a filmmaker looking for a creative partner, I would be happy to work with you to provide enticing storylines. Feel free to DM me on my email or WhatsApp, and let's make something amazing.